Welcome to July's BetaDen's Tech Tuesday. I'm Linda Smith, founder and CEO of BetaDen, and for those of you joining us for the first time today, I'll set the scene. BetaDen is a technology accelerator based at Malvern Hills Science Park, which we launched just over 2 years ago. Our USP is we're all about supporting tech with a definite route to market, either MVP readiness or investment. Tech Tuesdays have been created following the success of BetaDen's previous event series, Tech Talks. Throughout the development of the Tech Talks and the growth in popularity, it was apparent to BetaDen that we needed to adapt the event format. So Tech Tuesdays have been designed to host between 30 and 60 attendees on a bi-monthly basis, taking place on the first Tuesday of each month, with specific tech focus each time. We actively promote to and encourage attendees with a specific interest in emerging technology topics selected for each event. The event series is designed to drive and support both the local tech ecosystem based within Worcestershire and promote opportunities to a much wider network to help grow the tech-based network for BetaDen. That's both industry and academics. This is instrumental when it comes to recruitment windows for our future and tech-specific accelerator programs we hope to run in the future. Each tech topic offered in these talks will focus on areas of next-generation commercial technology, such as edge computing, IoT, security by design, and smart manufacturing, which all potentially could have 5G elements. So for today's theme, drone tech, the art of the possible, and why you've all tuned in and are waiting to hear from our two presenters today. We called it the art of the possible. Possibilities of tomorrow don't necessarily mean Star Trek technology. Instead, people should be excited by the capabilities of drones now getting scaled up. Large-scale drone integration and automation is now very real, and this in turn is advancing the industry with more data and cross-referencing. I think the other point to make is the multi-sector users this technology can revolutionize. It's across a very broad spectrum, everything from defense and technology right the way through to health, Medicare, manufacturing, industry, retail, logistics, and many, many more. The next phase of automation in analyzing the data using AI to automatically identify characteristics of imagery or physical features, such as measurements and spectrum analysis, taking the technology to the next level, as will all of its algorithms. These are also improving rapidly. And within 5 years, we will have more robust platforms to work from. It will be software that drives the heart of drone technology and its possibilities. The two presenter sessions will be followed today by a short Q&A, which again, we hope that you can pose questions for and get some really, really useful answers to. Today, we're lucky enough to have two innovators who are also very experienced drone practitioners. Again, we're really lucky to have a relationship with both of these companies and these company owners. And we believe that the drone technology pathway is looking very bright and there are many opportunities. So again, for those of you, whatever your reason for attending today, I think you'll have plenty to take away and plenty to get should we say, all of your thought processes stimulated by what you're about to hear. First, I'm delighted to introduce Gareth Whatmore, who is the co-founder of Drone Prep. If I could hand over to you now, please, Gareth, to take us into your 20-minute presentation and lead the way for this first session. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Right, I think I've got control. Thank you very much, Linda, for that wonderful introduction there. So to start off with, I should probably introduce myself and not jump forward too far in the slides. There we go, back to the start. Okay, so I'm Gareth Whatmore. I'm CEO of Drone Prep. I'm a transport planner by profession, and I've previously done work on the Olympics and Farnborough Airport and did the planning application also for the Emirates cable car. So transport's my background, and I got involved with drones about 6 years ago. And really, they're sort of transport, moving people and goods is like the lifeblood of our economy. And the way transport infrastructure is arranged dictates what the built environment looks like, and indeed our experience and interaction with the world. So Linda has kindly invited me to talk today about drones and share my experiences of the last few months, our response to COVID-19, which has led to the UK's first delivery projects in the UK. So I should also say that I've had a little look through the invite list today at BetaDen, all the people on the call. So thank you so much for joining today. There's some really brilliant names from the aviation sector who I really do admire and respect and have worked with on projects so far. But actually I'm more impressed actually by all the other stakeholders that are on this call that are probably looking at drones for the first time, potentially, people from backgrounds in agriculture, logistics companies. There's some conservation specialists on this call. There's some estate managers, asset managers, list goes on, architects, planners, media, marketing specialists, creative specialists, R&D scientists, and it goes on, blue chip companies, civil servants, regulators, and policymakers. Those are the groups of people that I've found on the list. I think that's fantastic, because to make the drone industry work, we need the insights of all and every single one of you. We need to work in collaborative environments. We need to understand all those different sectors and how the drone sector relates to them. If we do that, we solve the post-COVID-19 problems and 21st century challenges. So it's crucial that we all engage, understand how drone tech can solve your industry challenges, listen to your feedback and your knowledge to understand how to integrate drone tech in an acceptable and non-invasive way. So my story so far, as I mentioned, transport planner, but beyond that, I became a CAA accredited pilot in 2014. Here's me down the farm with some friends of mine on a flight. Quite a fun thing to do. And in those early days, basic drones, essentially. And we ended up doing some projects, transport planning projects with Scottish Canals and New Forest. And the project we had there was a ground-based mapping project where we were mapping the canals network and forestry cycle paths. And then all of a sudden, this amazing tech came along, drones. And it was like, wow, we should definitely get licensed to use the drones, see if we can do this project using drones. And there was a big issue, because it soon became apparent that whilst technology was revolutionary, the basic use cases were not always possible due to flight proximity rules. So essentially, with our problem solving hat on, we realized if we banked these different landowners on our projects, we could increase the size of our flight paths, and with their buy-in and permission. So we created a simple map helping drone pilots connect to landowners to secure permission. And essentially, we want to build a tool to help the 170,000 hobbyists and 10,000 commercial drone pilots to ask the simple question of, where can I fly my drone? So it was about this time that the idea got a bit of traction, and we were lucky enough to be accepted on the Geovation Accelerator, which is Ordnance Survey and Her Majesty's Land Registry. And then things changed quite considerably thereafter, because there was lots of people in this space that were sort of 10 years younger than me, and they were talking about all this crazy stuff that I just couldn't believe at the time, which was sort of flying cars, otherwise known as eVTOLs, new drones that could be integrated into an unmanned traffic management system. All sounded fairly new age. Vertiports for urban air mobility, drone delivery networks that could be responsive, flexible, and dynamic to the demands of a 21st century logistics supply chain. And this is basically a move away from fixed infrastructure like roads, railways, and airports, and a move toward a demand-driven route that can connect anything to anywhere using the one commodity that we haven't really fully utilised yet, airspace. And there were lots of people talking around this stuff, and it all sounded like we'd been there before. And the crazy thing is actually this is actually happening in the world now. So if we go around some of the images on this sheet. We've got top left, we've got the Volocopter, a German eVTOL, which one of the guys that I was in this accelerator with actually set up a vertiport in Singapore last year. So those are flying now. And then to the right, top right, we've got the EHang craft, which is a Chinese eVTOL. Again, that's flying in one of the harbors in China. And just below that, we have the Wingcopter, which is a VTOL drone delivery rig, and that's one of the rigs that's currently being used to deliver medical supplies in the United Kingdom. So the crazy thing is, you know, it sounded like something of the future, but it's here, and I'm converted, which is just so exciting. So we sort of turn to realize, to talk more about realizing the potential of tech here. So, you know, we've got such an exciting thing going on in the drone and eVTOL world, but actually, you know, there's lots of good ideas in tech, and not all of them are realized. And here are some examples. So top left, we've got Google Glass, a really fascinating technology developed by Google about 8 years ago for augmented reality in goggles, and they threw millions and millions of pounds at this solution. It's Google, so you'd expect them to get it right. And as it happens, they were too busy, they were too siloed. They forgot about some of the stakeholders and how to integrate the technology successfully. They didn't really consider people's privacy. And this was the undoing of Google Glass, because whenever they trialed it, they realized that the public perception was awful. They just thought people were spying on them. So they had some really avant-garde technology, but it wasn't fulfilled, and that project was not materialized. And it's only now that AI is beginning to happen again. So there is a potential. You can have all this great technology, good people working on stuff, but it doesn't become adopted. Likewise, if we go far right, those are segways. So segways were around from the mid-90s onwards. Brilliant technology. You know, could have revolutionized how we traveled around urban environments, electric transport, you know, way before its time. We could have reduced pollution and all sorts. And again, the same situation applies. We've got some people that are potentially siloed and don't consider all the stakeholders necessary to achieve mass adoption. And the area they didn't consider was how to get past the very specific regulations we have in the UK about transport on roads. So essentially, they also weren't adopted. On top of that, we've also got the e-scooters, which, you know, they're sort of in the balance at the moment. We might adopt them, we might not. There's trials at the moment giving e-scooters rights on the road that the segways were never afforded, but already that's causing a complex debate between people and different stakeholders. So the representatives for the visually impaired community are worried that those vehicles might interact in a negative way, and again, that might stop us from adopting that technology. So there's a big question mark. We've got such exciting technology around drones, but the big question mark is, are we going to fulfill the potential, and how are we going to do that together? So I think in this situation, this is where we can learn some lessons from history. So, you know, I think we've been here before. So it's some interesting anecdotes here. So there's some pictures to do with adoption of previous transport solutions. We've got a sort of bottom left, that's essentially an image of the first passenger railway in the United Kingdom, 1830, the line between Liverpool and Manchester. And when people spoke about wanting to travel by train, there was a great concern in the public that if we travelled above 20 miles an hour, that we'd turn inside out. That was what the Victorians thought. And of course, that's not what happened. If we go further up here, this chap next to this jet aircraft here is Chuck Yeager. Again, there were similar worries about breaking the sound barrier. That's the aircraft that broke the sound barrier in 1947. And again, they got past that, and the fears were relieved. So there's lessons about basically learning lessons from history. You know, for public acceptance, we need to overcome fears, and we can do that by demonstrating things for the first time. Overcoming adversity. So again, the George Stephenson train down here, they overcame adversity quite considerably. They did so because on the primary trip via train, the MP for Liverpool actually died during this. Sorry, I'll just take some water. Pardon me. The MP for Liverpool was aboard the train and was actually a casualty on the first ever passenger service between Liverpool and Manchester. And you know, this could have completely crippled the whole of the rail industry going forward. But the people that ran the line had the fortitude to stick with it. They were able to demonstrate that it wasn't the train that had caused the death, it was more the actions of the MP for being a bit, I think he was potentially inebriated and in the wrong place at the wrong time. So, you know, you overcome adversity. The other thing you can do is build redundancy into previous safety case. And if we go top right, not many people know this actually, but you've got, with the adoption of cars from sort of 1890 through to 1910 in the United Kingdom, there was a lot of fear about cars as well. And so we had this very archaic law where whenever you were driving a vehicle, you had to have someone walking in front of it with a red flag. And that was to warn others that you know, a car was coming and it was dangerous, and we were limited to below 14 miles an hour. You know, that's how cars looked for long enough. Which just seems bizarre in this day and age. So the key things, I suppose, and there's also an additional one, which is mimicking. So if we look at this aeroplane to the top left, that's a short Sunderland aircraft, and what they've done there to try and win public acceptance is it's a seaplane essentially, and they've done it all up to look like an ocean liner. And then that's how they win confidence, because it's, you know, it's a new technology and they're making it look like one which is already pre-established. It's a similar deal with cars as well. You know, the first people who invented cars also and trains even invented the concept of horsepower, and that was to mimic the abilities of a horse and say, you know, these vehicles are much like horses. We have 1 horsepower, 2 horsepower, 3 horsepower, etc. So you create acceptance by revisiting something that's already been accepted and applying it to the technology that you use. So essentially, you know, we need to understand the strategic landscape which tech will serve, understand the fears of tech adoption, win public acceptance by making small steps, by proving concepts, and show the value it can bring to other sectors in society. Incidentally, there's one aircraft here we've not spoken about. It's the one top middle. It's actually a drone, believe it or not. It's the first medical drone that's being used in the UK. And again, there's mimicking going on here. This looks like a 1930s rig. It looks like a 1930s aircraft. And one of the reasons why it's a really good place to start with adoption in the UK is because it looks like something that people already accept. So we move on to UTM models. So this is unmanned traffic management models. So there's a few debates about how we go about this, and ultimately it's small steps to winning public acceptance to achieve a good unmanned traffic management system. So you've got Model 1, which is sort of top left, and also on the right-hand side, which essentially is designing higher altitude drone corridors. Our biggest fear actually is trusting robots and not allowing them to crash in aircraft. So there's some tech challenges around that. But ultimately, you know, it's if we have these corridors, so the way it works is you take off from low-level airspace and then you end up in a high-level airspace and you have a corridor. It's going to be aircraft all in the same space together. The issue with this is it's kind of restrictive in terms of, you know, you need a drone port. It's not flexible and dynamic, and therefore it sort of mimics 20th century technology. You know, airport, railway station, everything is fixed. There's limited potential. The other model is bottom left, which I consider as flexible, dynamic, and responsive low-level airspace. It's largely segregated and safer, but it requires public acceptance. People want to know, what do drones look like? What do they sound like? Can they be safe? Can they add value? And these are the issues we need to deal with in this lower airspace. So, I mean, the interesting thing with Model 2 is, again, the good news is it's already happening. This is Reykjavik in Iceland, and there's two companies there that have collaborated together. And essentially they have, Europe's first drone delivery network delivering food in an urban area. It's not been done elsewhere. So top left, you can see some of the routes which their drone is taking to deliver food. They've just done the most brilliant thing in terms of how they've gone about it. They've engaged with all the landowners, all the stakeholders on the ground, and they've basically got the buy-in of the Highways Authority that have allowed them to overfly existing ground-based routes to deliver using their drones. They've also consulted with Israeli firms about packaging parachutes on board, so they've proved the safety case, and they've overcome all the barriers necessary. It's just a really, really fantastic, exciting use case, which we'd like to also do the same in the UK if possible. So that brings us on to, what have we been doing during COVID-19? So Linda sort of mentioned it there at the start there. So we're building a platform, but actually the last 3 or 4 months have been completely upside down, just like they have been for most of us. And we've sort of pivoted towards some large consortia projects that we're involved with that have been dealing directly with COVID-19 response. And the first one of those, bottom left, is the Wind Racers consortia with the University of Southampton. We'd previously got some funding from the DFT to deliver a much larger project. And this particular vehicle, it was scheduled to fly in about 2 years' time after a whole load of R&D had been completed. We were asked to deliver a similar use case for it as a consortia within a 3-week period, and we did. The rig at the bottom there can carry up to 100 kgs of cargo and is flying over the Solent to deliver medical supplies to the NHS. And that's just been a fabulous project to be involved in. It was the UK first. The project moves on. So top right, we've got 75 different surgeries in the Hampshire Solent region. All of those are to be connected by drone in the future, and we're going to move path supplies between each. It's going to make everything far more efficient for the NHS, and it's estimated it would save the NHS up to £2.5 million a year just from that one area. And then top left, you've got Skyports and Wingcopter, who have been the first VTOL drone to deliver medical supplies in Scotland between Oban and the Isle of Mull. And again, they've just been doing some absolutely fantastic work, because the route there, if it's not done by drone, it will take 6.5 hours to move the same goods, whereas by drone it takes 15 minutes, which is absolute revelation, and really shows that drones can be used for time-critical delivery in rural areas and really add value. Incidentally, Wingcopter and Skyports have also done brilliant work north of the border in terms of engagement with environmental stakeholders to ensure that birds are not interfered with in a negative way whilst this drone is flying sub 120 meter envelopes. And that's fantastic, and that's the type of engagement that we need to open up further opportunities in this space. And likewise, the Wind Racers team have worked diligently on new protocols for medical delivery, including how to define standards for dangerous goods delivery and how to ensure that medical samples can be transported and remain in the correct state when they arrive. So again, I'm revisiting or checking the clock at the same time, but I'm revisiting some slides here which broadly explain what our proposition is at Drone Prep. So again, we're sort of moving on from opening up that door through the medical delivery. We still want to help to define how the future skies are going to look like in the UK, and we strongly believe that that's in the low level airspace, and it's about flexible and dynamic delivery, which is what you can deliver by by making a solution in low-level airspace. So there's 170,000 recreational drone pilots all wondering where they can legally fly their drone, and 10,000 enterprise drone companies want to obtain access to low-level airspace to deliver new drone use cases in the UK economy. Altogether, the largest strategic landowners own about 80% of the land in the UK, and it's those guys that have a policy perhaps about drone access but aren't communicating it, and that's what our platform seeks to arrange. So again, the premise is very simple. Drone users need a landowner permission to take off land and to overfly property at low altitude, but they find it difficult to find out who owns their land and to agree terms of access. Whilst on the other hand, landowners are concerned about drones flying from and over their land without their permission, but they rarely communicate and publicise their drone policy to the drone community. And yeah, there's a couple of slides there which I was expecting to see at the end, which I'm not. But essentially, I can probably hand back to Linda at this stage.
Okay, thanks, Gareth. Did that give you enough time, Gareth, to reach the point you wanted to about drone prep? Just to finish up there.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, that's all good. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks very much for that, Gareth. And as I said, that was a bit of a walkthrough, should we say, from the evolution point of view, but also the revolution point that drone prep is reaching now and is heading towards in probably the next 12 to 18 months with its own planned growth. So I hope that that's should we say, given the audience today listening and anybody listening to this later on via YouTube, a flavour of where the tech has come from. And with all things with innovation, the real issues around adoption and investment. So, but I think we're round that corner now and heading in the right direction. Now I'd like to hand over to our second presenter today, who is going to kind of give you a very different view from the art of the possible with drone tech. Nigel Pugh is Managing Director of Impact Aerial, but Impact Aerial has also been a very active cohort member of Cohort 2 with BetaDen, and it has actually initiated the launch of his new company, Cidium. So this is a drone technology company that has been created through an accelerator program. And again, we're really watching with great interest to see the direction of travel with Cidium. So I'd like to hand over to Nigel to again deliver his very interesting presentation to our audience today.
Wow, thank you, Linda. What a great introduction. I wasn't expecting a pitch and you know, a soft introduction to Cidium, because we're going to cover that in my presentation. But thank you very much, and really thank you to Gareth as well. I'm fairly confident that my business, Impact Aerial, will probably become one of Drone Prep's customers for the landowner access. That's one of the things that we do on a daily basis and probably an hourly basis with some of the projects that we get involved with. So anyway, just a quick hello. So I'm Nigel Pugh, founder and CEO of the business Impact Aerial, and Linda mentioned one of the other businesses we're going to talk about today as a background. But what I really wanted to talk about was this whole premise of the art of the possible, what we can do today, tomorrow and beyond with drones, because I wanted to try and reset people's thoughts and expectations about what drones can do. I think I've lost control of the screen. Just bear with me a second. I'm going to advance the screen using the buttons, I think. There we go. So I wanted people to start by thinking about what can be done with drones today. A lot of people perceive drones potentially as a nuisance. Some people see them as an invasion of privacy. That's definitely not the case. And my business has been running for 3 years now, and we cover the United Kingdom and provide a range of services with drones. Most people think that obviously drones can do the traditional work, which is photography, videography. Some people will know that they can produce 360-degree panoramas. And some people might know about virtual tours as well. During COVID-19, a lot of companies were using drones and ground-based cameras to replace the normal tour of a business, because it was just so hard to get access because of the restrictions for COVID-19. So that would be a good example. But what I wanted to try and do in my short presentation is to give you a bit of a reset of your perceptions about what drones can really achieve. So that's one of the things I'd like to discuss. And we've got some real world user cases that we can discuss as well here too. So post COVID-19, a very, very real world project. It's a project we're working on now with a local major authority. They had an issue in the fact that they had a planning committee who could no longer visit sites. The reason being they had a range of individuals because of their age and some other health issues. It was far too risky for them to carry on doing their normal work, which would be potentially to drive either a car or groups of them go in a bus to actually inspect and visit sites that had planning permissions or planning permission applications in place. So they needed to find a way to get around that, to make sure that those people weren't attending site, putting them at a potential risk of COVID-19. Because these projects, it's a large local authority. There are lots of projects underway and there's a big backlog of planning approval. So the projects still need to progress. So what did we do? How we solve that problem for the authority? We worked very closely with the planning team, and the team here at Impact Aerial designed a solution for remote site visits. Now, what do we mean by remote site visits? So clearly the officers that were working for the authority could no longer visit the site, but still had the requirement to go and view the actual site and make sure they were performing their due diligence for a planning committee. So the way we addressed this was to design a process, an application and a plan for the drones to be installed and set up on site, and then for the remotely based officers working safely from home to virtually command the drone once it was deployed on the site. Now this has a lot of opportunity and a lot of almost greater capability than their normal role, because of course they're normally only land-based, so they can look across the site. Whereas with a drone, you obviously have the ability to look directly down, what we call nadir, or you have the acute oblique angles that you can visit. So now, with our design for that solution, the officers are able to produce planning reports and application reports remotely, and create documented reports with the high resolution pictures that we capture with our drones and 360 panoramas of the site. The advantage of a 360 panorama when it comes to planning is generally, if you're looking at an ordinary site plan, which is looking for planning permission, it's based upon the plan that the architect or the authority submitted. And it doesn't give you that ability to effectively revisit the site. With a 360 panorama captured in very, very high resolution, you can virtually take a tour through that site. And that allows the planning committee, still working at home in the remote offices, to actually effectively tour the site. So we call it a virtual planning committee site tour. That was what it was nicknamed. And that is a project that we're actually working on today with that authority, and it's very exciting. So at the very start of my presentation, I said, what can be done with drones today, tomorrow, and in the future? And then I thought, things are happening so rapidly in our business. And Gareth gave you some really good examples of the way things happened in the old days with steam trains and people not thinking. Now, the acceleration, and Gareth again actually showed you some of those real world examples. The acceleration of technology is happening so fast. It's no longer a case of today and tomorrow. It's a case of today and tonight, because things are changing that fast. I did put on one slide today, tonight, or this evening and tonight, but I want to give you the example of how things are changing so rapidly. So now, with the different types of instruments, we refer to them as instruments, the payloads we have on our drones. We have sensors that will produce overlays, traffic counts, progress monitoring, measurements. There's a whole range of different types of sensors that can be used on the drone to do different functions. Essentially, the drone is still flying, it's still being remotely controlled and still giving a video or a picture feed, but it's the actual data that it's capturing, which is then being stored locally, that's important. Now, one of those very specific applications is the NDVI measurement, which is a method of recognizing plants, plant recognition system. And we've actually used that and built an application around the NDVI index. Now that is actually referred to as the software solution that we've created, CIDIUM. We call it invasive species mapping. We created it because a particular client we were working with had a very specific issue with a particular type of non-native invasive species. and I'm going to come into that. So what exactly does Cidium do? It's one of our software solutions. We use drone captured data, so intelligent drone data. We then apply that to an analysis platform, and it performs recognition of non-native invasive species. Some of those examples are Japanese knotweed, black grass, Himalayan balsam. They are plants that have a very strong, aggressive rate of growth and cause large amounts of damage to infrastructure, particularly for construction and the railway industry as an example. One of the big issues, once particularly with Japanese knotweed, once it's actually managed to start growing in an area, is the cost to remove it, and that can be very, very high. Single instances can be £40,000 to £100,000 to remove. So clearly, you don't want to let it actually start growing. So the solution we designed with Cidium was an early growth recognition to make sure that you recognize it before it actually starts to cause problems for your building or your construction, whatever work it is you're doing. So how do we do that? We have a regular drone survey of the sites deemed at risk. The client generally knows that. They're looking for it because they might have been informed, again, by an authority or another business that's told them there's a risk of infection. So we run automated flights weekly and monthly. The Cidium software then starts by baselining the site. So it looks at what it sees and builds a baseline so we understand the objects that are on that site. We refer to that as what's normal. And then Cidium's artificial intelligence system recognizes deviations from normal. So we call that what's changed. So alert us when something has changed. And then we have a difference engine with analytics built into the package that will create alerts when something changed and will produce an alert and an event report. And we call that what changed and when. So we need to talk about what can be done with drones tomorrow. So a lot of people are a little bit concerned about the potential for higher levels of invasive privacy invasion, I should say. So tracking and artificial intelligence and decision making, they're all things that are happening actually now. So it's not even tomorrow. That there are projects underway, and the changes are going to come as regulations are potentially relaxed, or at least they are being controlled so that we are all performing within a set of predefined parameters when it comes to using semi-autonomous drones. Semi-autonomous, the advantage of the semi-autonomous solution is, of course, it's going to perform repetitive, complex inspections without the necessary intervention of a controller, of a pilot, in whatever case it might be. But it's the fact that you can repeat the inspection on a regular basis, and it's semi-autonomous, that gives it a great deal of advantage. So again, I talked about the future. So this is actually not quite the future because this is happening now. This is a project that we actually are working on with a major UK organisation. Started in 2020, sadly got a little bit delayed because of the issues with COVID-19. But we've created, and are still creating right now because it's in its early evolution phase, a solution for autonomous inspection. And we've given it a name so that we can refer to it. It's called the Air Unit, which is the autonomous inspection robot. I like to refer to drones as a robot. They're a remotely controlled device. They're capturing data. They're doing something with that data, and then somebody else is manipulating that data. That is effectively what a robot does. So what we're actually talking about with the Air Unit is it's an intelligent drone in a box. I like to say that makes it effectively an engineer in a box because it has a predefined set of rules of what it needs to do as its daily role, its job, what it's going to inspect, what it's going to look for. But the point is that it's an autonomous unit, semi-autonomous unit, that is doing that on a regular basis. So the Air Unit's primary role is to perform regular planned maintenance and inspections, in this case of a railway infrastructure. It doesn't have to be a railway infrastructure. It could be monitoring of major roads. It could be monitoring of the motorways, so the ebbs and flows of the motorways, to see what is actually happening, how traffic is being affected by the changing conditions. We did actually start a project with another company to monitor traffic on the M40 motorway, but that was just before the COVID-19 crisis occurred. And of course, there was very little traffic on the motorway, so it stalled as a project. So it was one of those things that we were looking at. So to talk about how our air unit is going to achieve this monitoring on the regular basis of in this case, the railway infrastructure, we needed to look at a specific item within the infrastructure that was key to the ongoing day-to-day running of a large railway infrastructure in the United Kingdom, and that is a track switch. So when it needs to change a lane or when it needs to change track to move to a different part of the United Kingdom, track switches require regular preventative maintenance. It's a large, very, very heavy item with electronic switching, electrical switching, and obviously some reporting built into that. But it's quite old-fashioned technology in the fact that it's mostly mechanical and electrical operation. It doesn't really have, it's almost dumb. It doesn't really have any of its own inbuilt intelligence reporting. There are other projects underway for creating digital twins within the railway network, and we're working with one of the universities in Birmingham to work on that as well from a monitoring point of view. But the point is to produce a method of monitoring, and in this case we're talking about the track switches, that allows whoever's making that inspection to do it safely and efficiently. So the best way to do that is actually to remove the person from the equation. Railways are a very hazardous workplace and potentially life-threatening to trackside workforce. So if you can replace that with an automated process, and in this case it's with what we call a drone in a box, RA units, it makes the whole process much more automated, much more efficient, and ultimately much more safer. So the air unit that we're talking about replaces human inspections, which will allow the safe operation and best practice of the automated inspections that need to happen on a regular scheduled work plan. So the key to this project is the fact that the data is collected across local points, in this case throughout the United Kingdom on the railway infrastructure. And then the data is aggregated and normalized, but actually delivered via the rail operator's own network. So the network exists for rail operators where they can share data, and that data can then be drawn across that network into a locally collected central database. So once it is brought in, it's compiled into the database and monitored, and it is then presented in the rail operating centre's operations centre, so they can see how well the track switches are performing to make sure there aren't any deviations from normal. Again, it uses a very similar AI system to the solution we mentioned before in Cidium. And it's basically an automated, semi-autonomous management and reporting solution for the railway infrastructure. Oh, I went too far, sorry. Bear with me 1 second. So there's a little picture of our air unit, which is the box that's deployed. And obviously the drone lives inside the box, connected to the network, fully automated deployment of the inspection of the actual switch that we were talking about. And it's an AI-based drone in a box complete solution. So I need to check on my timing again to make sure that I'm doing okay. I've got 3 minutes left. We just wanted to have a quick summary of BetaDen for us, because it's been a fantastic experience for my business, Impact Aerial, and the guys within my team. And we wanted to say what we thought was the reason why BetaDen was so much better, so different to everything else. And we think it's a really unique approach. It's actually the approach that makes all the difference. And it was the pathways that helped turn our ideas into deliverable solutions. So our ideas at the start were almost pipe dreams, but they were obviously designed to try and fix some problems. And BetaDen has helped us realize those solutions within an actual fairly short time frame. So 9 months was BetaDen. It seemed to be over far too soon, but they really did create some massive traction and massive moving on of our solution. And that allowed us to create 2 brand new companies for distinct vertical markets. One of those is Cidium that we mentioned earlier on. That's the invasive species mapping solution. And the other one is Narika, which is an AI-based reporting platform for geo-init, so intelligence for ListX organizations in defense, where they are monitoring assets on the ground, and the drones are used for making sure they are assessing those situations from a threat perspective safely for the operatives. So once again, we're coming to the end, and Impact Aerial just want to say really thank you so much to BetaDen. Thank you for inviting us to this presentation today. It's been great to talk about some of the projects we've worked on, real projects that we're thoroughly enjoying and we're working on right now. And we just really wanted to extend our personal thanks to Linda and the team at BetaDen, because It's been a fantastic journey, and thanks again, Linda and the guys, and good luck with cohort 3. It's been wonderful. Thank you very much indeed, everybody.
Okay, if you could just pass the control back, that's great. Thank you very much. Obviously, we'll take all praise given, but obviously it's about what Impact Aerial, Narika and Cidium are doing, which is what today's session is around. And now I'd like to move into the Q&A session with our panelists. For a short Q&A, we've got some questions in, and I would like to perhaps pose them to obviously both Gareth and Nigel, but I will give you both the option to answer if you're comfortable answering. If you're not, hand to each other in relation to expertise. So a couple of questions straight off the portal. I see rules being relaxed this week on BVLOS in Canada. What changes will rules and regulations in key markets like USA and EU around BVLOS bring, and what do we expect the timing and roadmap to be? And these questions come in from Intelligent Energy.
That's one for you, I think, Gareth. That's
Yeah,
your area. Yeah.
Happy to take that. So yeah, for clarity, for those that aren't aware, BVLOS is beyond visual line of sight. So that's long distance drone applications, which at the moment are not easy to achieve in the United Kingdom, but not impossible. And actually, the medical cases that we spoke about during the presentation earlier, both of those achieved BVLOS in the United Kingdom for the first time, proving that that is possible with the right engagement with either the Civil Aviation Authority or other ground-based stakeholders, environmental stakeholders, and you name it. But to address the question directly, see the rules being relaxed this week on BVLOS in Canada. Yes, that's definitely taken place. It's not the only place either. Dubai has also relaxed their rules quite recently, and I suppose places like Canada with sparse populations, there's all sorts of incredible use cases that can be done in terms of drone delivery, but in terms of inspection on utilities. And there's not too many ground hazards because it's such a large and vast country. Dubai is a bit different. It's actually quite the opposite, but in terms of the way that places, different places in the world are regulated, it's a lot easier to get permissions through places like Dubai because there are less people there to give things the green light. Whereas, as you're aware, in the United Kingdom, there's all sorts of people we need to consult with before we can change anything or do anything differently. So yes, I think the BVLOS thing is very interesting and different depending on where you are in the world. But the quick answer, now I'm finally at the quick answer bit, is I think there's lots of use cases, all the things you could possibly imagine, including drone delivery from anywhere in the UK that needs a drone delivery from any place, in a lovely, flexible and dynamic system to do so. eVTOLs, so drones with people in them, essentially, all of that is on the cards once we've convinced people and we've worked together with different sectors to prove that BVLOS is safe, but also the right thing for society.
Time frame?
Time frame, depending where you are in the world. So you've got the likes of Uber Elevate in the States and also Australia that want to do air taxis in the next 3 to 4 years, I think it is. And in terms of drone delivery in the UK, it's already happening. So it depends on what your application is. But we've, literally the COVID-19 situation has accelerated this area significantly. As I mentioned on the project we're on in Southampton, a use case that we were meant to do R&D for 2 years has been delivered in 3 weeks. So wow. where there's a will, there's a way.
I was going to say, okay, UOR, definitely. Question for Nigel in relation to the autonomous inspection robot. Is Air an Azure drone product?
Well, that's a really good question because they've actually found us out there because I had to use a stock photo, which is the Azure Drones product. We don't have a photo of ours because we had to sign an NDA with the company we've created it with. We will get some photos when we're doing further development with that. I did cheat by using that photo because I wanted to show what a drone in a box was effectively like. So it's not, Air is not an Azure Drones product, I'm sorry to say, Michael, to answer your question directly.
Okay, thanks for that. Another question in relation to battery life. So batteries have limited energy density. Hydrogen fuel cells are commercially available now that offer 3 to 5 times the flight duration or higher payload. Will much longer flight times and larger payloads have significant impact on the industry?
Do you want me to answer that one, Gareth?
Yeah, do you want to go?
Yeah, I can do.
Stab, yeah.
So different types of propulsion for drones. Clearly, one of the biggest limitations is the battery power. You don't have to be limited by battery power because we do have access to tethered drones these days, and tethered drones can be used for providing the power. So it's effectively a cable between the drone and the ground, and the method of data collection too. But the question was more about, I think, about hydrogen and hydrogen fuel cells. And I think without a doubt, you'll see a lot more of the large scale industrial drones using hydrogen fuel cells. I also think you might see quite a few hybrid drones where there is effectively an engine, a fairly normal internal combustion engine on the drone, which is also generating power for it to stay in the air much longer. So supplementing the electrical power system that's on board. But I think the one challenge you'll have always with any form of different type of propulsion, particularly hydrogen power, is the initial cost. So the initial cost has to be looked at in the actual overall running of the whatever service the drone is providing. So if it's monitoring, it clearly depends on what you're going to be monitoring and the actual impact of how important the drone stays in the air for a much longer period of time. And you have to obviously then weigh up the cost effective. But I think the answer to the question was definitely we'll see a lot more changes to the types of propulsion units used in drones, because we all want to have our drones in the air for longer. If you're doing any form of inspection, we do a lot of regular inspections for large clients where we do cover large areas. We do have to land the drone, change the batteries, and then resume it. Our software allows us to do that, but it would be great to be able to map and monitor larger areas with just one single flight. We can do that today. So there are a lot of platforms which are VTOL, so vertical takeoff and landing, and then they transform their flight pattern effectively into more like an ordinary aircraft, and then they can go away and do a semi-automatic mapping. They fly longer because they're generally a little bit like a radio controlled plane. It looks like a large foam wing, but they don't have so much propulsion requirements. But the ultimate answer to the question is yes, we will see many more hydrogen and hybrid based drones flying in the future.
Okay, thank you. A question about obviously the big challenge around regulatory scenario, which you both alluded to in your presentations, and the good and the bad press. But what is the ideal regulatory scenario to develop successful cases of drones in, should we say, what we're talking about, innovation and technology and the ability to scale up the product and service? So what's the ideal regulatory scenario that is needed to kind of really get this moved on, and that time frame issue that we've already talked around? So can I come to you, Gareth, for just your perspective?
No, that's grand. So I think actually we do need to credit our regulators here in the UK. Obviously, it's not always the funnest job to be a regulator, because usually your answer to everything is no, 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 maybe yes, in that sort of order. But they've been really good this year. They've got an innovation hub, and they take on specific companies, delivery companies or companies right at the high end of the drone space, and they're actively engaging with all these new pioneering drone tech companies to help solve problems. And I think that's going to become even more pronounced, because we've got this situation with the second age of flight at the moment, where you've got so many existing business models that are significantly damaged by COVID-19, and some may or may not recover. The CAA will, I'm sure, be looking for more engagement with the innovation hub that they've got to see what's possible. So I think, the regulatory environment, as long as they're listening, that's all we ask for. And they're providing abilities to connect with other users in the drone space. They're helping with testbed sites. They're doing their best to sandbox different environments. And where Drone Prep comes in, I mean, we can help in terms of engaging with landowners and ground-based stakeholders. If we can win hearts and minds of those people and the public, that's also very important. So it's twofold: the regulator, but also engaging with all the different sectors and stakeholders necessary to get win confidence essentially with the public.
Okay, Nigel, anything you'd like to add to that?
One of the other things regarding regulation, Gareth mentioned the CAA. So obviously the CAA are currently the regulator for operating space for ourselves operating drones. That was due to change, and it was going to be effectively migrated across to the EASA, so the European air, effectively the equivalent of the CAA in Europe. That's been delayed. I think it was going to happen in July, wasn't it, Gareth? That was the plan, and it's now being pushed back to pushed back towards the end of the year. I think because of everything that's happened with COVID-19, it probably will get delayed perhaps to next year now, and I think we'll see a change. But that will actually allow some quite different methods of control, and potentially open it up a little bit, because they are, I'm not saying they're more relaxed, but they have different views and different ways of approaching it. And I also think we are working with people like the satellite catapult. Those organizations will also start to have much more of an input into the flight space that we all use as drone operators. I think you'll see some changes. Ultimately, it's going to come from government if they want to impose, much more strict flights. I'm sure Gareth would like it if they did impose some more some strict flight controls, where we can actually work in defined controlled air corridors for drones, as well as the flight corridors that exist. But I think we'll see. The honest answer as operators is we really don't know today what's happening, because it's literally a movable feast. It's got delayed by COVID-19. The CAA didn't really wash their hands and sort of hand it over to the EASA regulations, but a lot of pilots felt that they were going to be left high and dry because they weren't sure what the regulations were going to be going forwards. We've had a change in the methodology for certification and testing of drone pilots. That all came about because of the EASA regs being introduced. So the answer is it's going to be dramatically changed, but honestly, we don't know, because there are so many unanswered questions about the regulations going forwards.
To jump in on the end of that, if I may, I mean, there does appear to be a real appetite actually at the moment, I think, from the civil service and from government towards innovation. And even recently, the government's announced this Jet Zero Council with the ambition of doing electric powered flight across the Atlantic within 10 years. And there's a real big push in politics at the moment for more R&D funding, more innovation. And I do think the regulation environment will change as and when we can demonstrate we can do things safely.
Okay, I'm going to have to cut to the last question now, if I may. We have a great question in from one of our Australian attendees today, Fiona Lake. So I'm going to really, again, to both of you, I'll put it out there. So Fiona asks, it's directed to Nigel, I would stress, recognizing weeds. How much work has to go into machine learning so that weeds are correctly identified? At a drone conference in Amsterdam last year, someone in electricity tower inspection talked about having to feed in many thousands of images to get reliable accuracy. And just as an aside, weeds cost Australia an estimated $8 billion Australian dollars annually. So spot spraying drones have huge potential to save money and treat weeds effectively. So a bit left field, but an area which, should we say, has a huge, should we say, cost element to it. So Nigel, thoughts on that?
And it's great because it's not really left field. It is one of the biggest issues when it comes to recognizing, it doesn't have to be an invasive plant species like Japanese knotweed or Himalayan balsam we talked about. I mentioned also black grass. You're looking for anything that's got a aggressive rate of growth, which will have a dramatic effect on whatever environment it's going to go into. And the answer to the lady's question is, of course, you do need to feed very, very large data sets. And the growth of our solution, our platform, Sidium, is based around a lot more investment into some very high-level processing capabilities to actually populate that AI engine with a vast amount of imaging and deviation imaging so that it can recognize those plant types. And of course, you don't want to just recognize 3 plant types. Ideally, you want to recognize every single plant type, and that's a really big challenge. So we specifically went for several of them because, of course, we had a client that was very interested in looking, or mostly interested in getting rid of Japanese knotweed because of the costs and the damage to their building. But it can be done. And I like to say to people, we don't try to say we will recognize every type of weed. Weed's a great phrase. It doesn't have to be a weed. It could be anything. What we're trying to do is recognize And that's the important thing. The deviations from normal, when we do the baseline, we're looking for changes. So it could actually be, it could be a flower growing very, very rapidly and something different. It might not be a weed. It might be something that you want to see growing. But we can recognize a lot of other species. They could be weeds, they could be anything. But the answer to the question is yes, it can be done, but it does require a lot more work and a lot more image processing to be applied. I think you're muted as far as I'm concerned, Linda. I can't hear you.
Very sorry. I said, is there anything you wanted to add to that, Gareth, or are we going to leave that question there?
I think on this one, Nigel is the absolute specialist. So I
wouldn't say that, but
that
I appreciate it.
Okay. Well, as I think we'll bring today's Tech Tuesday to a kind of end. But again, really kind of interesting area we've covered today. And as I said, you've heard from two of our leading exponents in the field for this. So I hope our listeners and attendees are enjoying this information. And I know that they'll be very, very willing to hear from any of you that want to kind of pick up on these conversations and pursue any particular areas that you're interested in having a conversation around. So from me and the BetaDen team, anything you want to know about BetaDen, it's all on our website, which is beta-den.com, which has recently been refreshed. So I hope there's lots of new information available on there. The next Tech Tuesday event is the 8th of September at midday again. And the topic this time will be security by design, which is again 3 tiny words, but the reality is the standardization challenge around security by design, again, across the whole spectrum of sector delivery and societal digital transformation. So we are really hoping that we're going to have 3 leading speakers for our Tech Tuesday on the 8th of September, and particularly with Worcestershire's big lead on 5G commercial testbed, which we hope to be releasing some information around soon. All of that starts to knit together nicely with the potential around a lot of technology, IoT, edge computing, and as I said, this big security by design conundrum, which is eating up tech that's on the market now, but is looking now for the next level and the deeper need for that. But thank you very much to both of our presenters today, to Gareth Whatmore from Drone Prep and for Nigel Impact from Pugh.
Nigel Impact.
Nigel from Impact Aerial and Cidium. I'm Linda Smith, CEO of BetaDen. Great to have you on board today. Please come to all of our tech talks or any of our future events. Thank you very much for attending.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye-bye.